2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn dope into DFS pros.
Alright, welcome to the Taco Tuesday PGA Daily Fantasy Golf Podcast, presented to you by DFSArmy.com. Sign up today using the link in the description to gain access to our premium fantasy golf tools, including the cheat sheet, which I'll be referencing on the pod, the Domination Station Lineup Optimizer, and tools for every single daily fantasy sport there is. So come check us out at DFSArmy.com and support the pod using promo code TACO on sign up for a lifetime 20% off. So before I begin my breakdown of the Memorial Tournament, it's important to note that FanDuel is back with their golf offerings, and they changed the system from the round 1 and 2, round 3 and 4 format, which pretty much nobody liked, and replaced it with just a standard everyone on your team counts scoring system with 8 golfers instead of DraftKings 6. And I kind of like the move because it sort of reminds me of how Fantasy Feud was back when that was around. And that had a roster of about 10 golfers, but I think the more golfers that you can select on a team, the more skill kind of comes out. And while it's not like Fantasy Draft that removes the score of your lowest scoring golfer, it still helps in reducing the effects of really strange miscuts and withdrawals and things like that, with having a smaller percentage of your fantasy scoring coming from each individual player, with 8 golfers on the roster instead of just 6. But at the same time, hitting the winner isn't quite as important as getting all 8 guys through the cut. That's just absolutely going to be crucial. And unlike DraftKings scoring, they really do penalize bad play over the weekend. And if your guy makes the cut and just has a really terrible weekend or gets MDF'd or something, that could hurt you more than someone just missing the cut. So it's something you have to consider. And also they really value birdies and birdie streaks and things like that. And while it's kind of hard to predict who will get streaks of 3 birdies in a row, you can still use conventional knowledge and birdie or better stats to kind of help you pick guys that have both upside and cut making consistency and get them on your lineups. And they've kind of tightened the prices up a little bit. Not too much. There are still some pretty obvious plays like Cantlay that are way underpriced. But they have gotten a little less ridiculous in terms of the super punts down low. The bottom 10 to 20 golfers are probably the worst golfers on the entire slate. So they did a pretty good job with that. It's just there are still some really good guys that they haven't quite caught on with pricing and all that, but they've got it pretty much figured out up top. So definitely looking to get into a lot of FanDuel this week, with it being a new thing and people, I guess, not having the proper strategy or whatever coming in, although it actually kind of takes a bit of the strategy out that we had in the round 1 and 2 scoring system, and it makes it a little more basic, but still, it's a great tournament with a strong field, and it'll be a good chance to check out the new FanDuel system. And if they've got better structured tournaments, you might want to play more on there than on DraftKings, but it's all up to you and where you have your money at and all that. So getting into the Memorial Tournament here, we are at the home course of Jack Nicklaus. We're headed to Muirfield Village. I hate saying that, Muirfield. It's a very awkward thing to say, but Muirfield Village in Columbus, Ohio. Well, not exactly Columbus, Ohio, but pretty much Columbus. It's in Dublin, Ohio. right outside of Columbus, home of Jack Nicklaus. Very, very strong field. It's pretty much the second biggest or second best field that we'll get outside of the majors. Probably only to the Players. It's a very stacked field. Only 120 golfers, just like last week, so more of the field will make the cut than usual when there are about 150 golfers in the field. So that can change your strategy a little bit. You can be a little crazier with it, but the pricing kind of screwed up everything this week from the get-go. Well, it's not really a bad thing because there are so many underpriced people that you still have to choose from a bunch of them. But as usual with the stronger tournaments, the pricing is just jacked up. At least Sawgrass was kind of okay for the most part. This one, there were just some really ridiculous plays in the 7 and 6K range where people's prices just went crazy for pretty much no reason. We'll get into those as we go through the player picks, but when looking at the statistics we should be focusing on for this course, it's a 7,400 yard par 72, so a long course, but with very wide fairways. You'd figure it would be a pure bombers course from that point, but a lot of the fairways have pretty tricky aspects to them, be it trees or rivers that run across the side of the fairway. Well, I guess not rivers, technically creeks or cricks or whatever, but this was really made to be a course management course because after the somewhat forgiving fairways, you have a really tricky approach shot at most of these holes. The greens are pretty small in size and they're very slick at over 13 on the stimp meter. So it'll be hard to get these balls to stick onto the green. And despite that, you'd figure that the green and regulation percentage from last year would be pretty low, given the slick greens you can slide off of. But actually, they hit the greens in regulation at almost a 70% clip at this tournament last year, which was one of the best marks on tour. And I think a lot of the reasoning for that is the penalties for hitting the greenside bunkers and the extremely thick rough here at this course is very damning. So you absolutely need to hit these greens. And people might not want to gamble on the placement shots that are a little more risky but will land you closer to the hole, and just be focused on hitting the green and getting it to stay on there because it's so hard to scramble out of here. So that kind of once again makes it a really good strokes gained approach week. Important every week, but especially important this week for getting it to stick on these small greens. And we'll pay a little attention to strokes gained around the green as well, because they're going to be scrambling quite a bit here. I'm not going to really worry about putting, as the greens are, tough enough to really make it lag putty for everybody that doesn't hit it really close. That's going to be the key here, is taking advantage of the par 5s and these longer par 4s. There are 7 par 4s between 450 and 500 yards this week, and 4 par 5s, with it being a par 72, and a lot of them are reachable for eagle attempts. So I will be paying attention to guys that are good at par 5 scoring, since the par 4s are generally harder to score on with them being longer, and the par 3s naturally not giving up a lot of scoring. No eagle opportunity unless you hole in one, and birdies are a bit tougher just the way they're set up. So you're going to want to attack the par 5 scoring at this course for fantasy purposes, while at the same time being a bit cautious of guys who are super reckless with their approach shots or even with their drives. They can get into some really bad trouble here. And historically, a lot of the guys that have done well here have been your Jim Furyk's and Steve Strickers. So while being a par 72 would lead people, to go to these bombers or whatnot, just know that the serious ball strikers that have at least a touch of distance going for them, or even guys like Stricker that have no real distance, they still definitely have a chance. It's just harder for guys like that to score a lot of fantasy points, but we're not going to want to count anyone out based on their play style, basically. We really want to see them have good long par 4 scoring, good par 5 scoring, and believe me, it's not necessarily bombers that are the best at par 5 scoring. There are a lot of just raw accuracy guys who just hit it on 3 and lock down the birdie every time and never really get into trouble on par 5s. And sometimes that's better than guys that are super aggressive and go for eagles. Although in tournaments, that's absolutely what you want. But to summarize, what we're looking for are guys that have great approach, can really just gain strokes off of the tee. I guess strokes gained off the tee will be more important than either distance or accuracy, but you kind of want both. So that's a good way to sum that up. And more approach the green than putting this week. And you should definitely keep an eye on birdie or better percentage, along with the efficiency scoring projections. Birdie or better percentage is going to help with it being kind of a scorer's course. Top 5 in birdies last year and top 15 in eagle percentage. And with it playing a stroke under par, you're going to want to be able to get all these birdies, especially for fantasy scoring purposes. You know the drill. So really just good overall guys that can play well in a strong field. And guys with good course history have a bit of a bonus this week. It seems like course history, similarly to like Augusta, like really matters here. There are tons of guys with great course history streaks that are consistent. And course management here kind of builds the case for that. So I'm weighting it not as much as recent form, but almost as much, like a lot more than usual. Usually I weight recent form about 2 or 3 times as much as course history. Course history is going to be taken into effect quite a bit here because it is very telling. And we're kind of coming off of a few weeks in a row where course history didn't really matter too much. So it'll be a little different than the previous few weeks. So on to the field here. It's a very strong, very packed field. You've got your big boys on top, Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm, and those two are going to be the absolute chalk here. I think Rahm is going to destroy 30% owned, and maybe if he gets touted enough, which so far he definitely is, with him almost winning last week at the Dean in DeLuca, it's pretty safe to say that Rahm's going to be the highest owned guy on the entire slate, and he might even push like 35% ownership in tournaments. Going back to Dustin Johnson, this might be the time to roll with a lot of Dustin Johnson, with a lot of people going Rahm, but the problem this week is that the pricing is so crazy down low that it's very easy to make a lineup with both Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm in it. And I've made quite a few like that I'm very happy with. So that might actually be a go-to strategy here. Lock in these two absolute studs and go on your merry way. Rahm could be a really, really nice fade, but at this point it's really hard to get off of him. The dude's incredible week to week. We're not going to see him in the quadruple digit salaries for quite a long time unless he goes on a crazy bad streak or something. He just destroys everything you need at this course. Amazing approach game. Just absolutely incredible. One of the tops in the entire field. Just destroys off the tee everything. He's going to bomb the crap out of it. And he's actually been putting decently. Just a little bit above average, so you got to give it to Rahm. Despite the no course history and all that, the dude's legit. Fading him in tournaments, though, might be very helpful. So kind of what I did last week. What I said last week, even though it lost you money in tournaments, obviously, you just play him in cash and fade him in tournaments because he's going to be so high owned. I could just see a situation in which the chalk just gets absolutely rocked here. Sure, a lot of it's in my imagination, but call it wishful thinking. I'm probably going to just go a bit underweight on him, like 20% or so. Not to be totally off of him, but I don't know. It's just really hard to get away from him when he's so affordable, even at 11,100. And Dustin Johnson is 12,000, so it's quite a bit of savings off of him. I think he's definitely a safe play on FanDuel at 10,800. Again, he's 1,000 cheaper than Dustin Johnson on there, 11,800. But while DraftKings has some really soft pricing this week, FanDuel is probably even a little worse still. And it's hard not to be able to afford Rahm. And now with the first and second and third and fourth round not being separated anymore, you have to plug in Rahm at this point. 10,800 is just way too affordable on FanDuel. I kind of talked about Rahm a whole lot here and kind of glossed over DJ. And I think that's his upside this week, is that people, Rahm is like the new fancy toy that everybody is playing with and enjoying right now. Dustin Johnson was definitely that way, for the last half year or so. Everybody loves playing Dustin Johnson. He's not going to not be popular this week. He'll just be lower owned than Rahm. And either playing them together or just going DJ will probably do you really good here. I mean, he's still absolutely incredible. He hasn't really been knocked out of his amazing form. Has good course history here. Finished third last year. Usually a top 20 machine here. Missed the cut in 2013. But at this rate, you just got to play the guy. He's been doing everything perfectly that you want to see here. Statistically, just about as amazing as Rahm. A little more power than him. The only thing he's lacking in comparison to Rahm is the approach game, but he is a better putter for whatever it's worth. And the biggest leg up he has on Rahm is he's a good scrambler, while Rahm is slightly under average. So something to consider there. But moving on down to a guy that will definitely be overshadowed, despite tying with Rahm last week, is Jordan Spieth, $100 cheaper than Rahm on DraftKings, but even better, $800 cheaper than Rahm on FanDuel at 10,000. Spieth has decent course history here. Finished third in 2015. Hasn't missed the cut in 4 attempts, but pretty good. Just not super or anything, but it's encouraging that he's never missed the cut here. He did miss 3 of his last 5 cuts, but he looked spectacular last weekend. So you can't really... I don't know if he's back to form exactly, but we're definitely seeing signs of life from him with how he did here and how he did at the Masters. And we're definitely going to want to look at the Masters and look at the players for comparisons this week, just because of the strong fields. And playing in strong fields, obviously, just so much different than playing in kind of a scrub event, although the fields have been okay recently. Now it's into the swing of things and in the swing season, or not the swing season, the major season, and getting out of the swing season. But I don't know. Spieth, he's gonna go overlooked. I'm overlooking him honestly because Rahm and DJ just demand attention. He'll be lower owned than he probably ought to be, but at the same time, if you're just going off of what you ought to be doing, you really ought to just be playing DJ and Rahm, in all honesty, unless you're just trying to play the ownership percentages. And I think Spieth's a fine play as far as ownership percentages go. I just prefer him on FanDuel over DraftKings. I really like Jason Day a lot as a contrarian option here. Last time we saw him was out at the Byron Nelson. He finished second, losing in a playoff to Billy Horschel. He's back in form, I'd say. Made 3 cuts in a row. Nothing physically bothering him. He looks to be in fine shape. He could easily go back into tournament winning day form. His course history here isn't anything spectacular. No top 25 finishes. He makes the cut more than often, but none of those high upside finishes, no top 25s. Kind of slightly worrying, but the thing that'll make him great on both sites is he's going to be very low owned, despite coming off a T2 finish, just because you got 2 guys right above him coming off of some T2 finishes, and Rahm and Spieth are going to be more popular. Rahm a lot more popular, and TJ, of course, very popular as always. There's going to be an empty zone right underneath those two ownership suckers, and Spieth and Day falling right into it, but Day even more so. Not very many people are going to play Day, especially on FanDuel. He's going to be incredibly low on FanDuel, where he's 10,300, more expensive than Spieth, and I like playing him there just because of that. I think he's going to do great. He's a much better scrambler and much better putter than any one of the super studs in this group, and he's just as long. I like him for the contrarian play that he is. I also kind of like Adam Scott for the same reason. At 9,800, he's usually popular, but he's going to be less popular this week, with him being priced pretty fairly compared to when we've seen him previously so far this season, him being underpriced. Oh my gosh, I totally skipped over Hideki Matsuyama, 10,000. Well, I'll do them both together because they're both sort of the same play-ish here. Matsuyama has won here back in 2014, followed that up with a T5 finish, and then missed the cut last year, screwing a lot of people, including myself, who were all over him. He's been all right. We haven't seen him on tour that often, just playing the big events. Played the Masters and the Players, finishing T11, T22 after getting in kind of a mini slump after his ridiculously hot start to the season with the 5 wins. That upside is still there. He's won at this tournament right here, and he is like the best scrambler in the field. I think he's the best scrambler in the entire field. I'm not 100% sure about that. Okay, no, Kisner actually is, but he's right there. Tee to green, he's awesome at every aspect of the tee to green. Not as much as he was to begin the season, obviously, but long term, thinking back, his entire career, he's pretty much led the PGA Tour in tee to green. That's his game. He's just a bad putter, and I like that a lot here. Like me some Matsuyama. He's got doesn't quite have the driving distance of all the guys above, except for Spieth. Looking at Day, Rahm, Scott, Johnson, he's almost as long as them, but he's far more accurate of a driver, and I like that a lot here. I like his upside, like the fact that he's won here, and the fact that he will be a pivot off of the other top-end studs. And at 10,000, he's kind of overpriced on DraftKings, which is great for what I plan on using him for. Going to Scott, he has course history that's about as good. 4th last time out in 2014, 13th in 2013. His recent form has been great. Finished 6th at the Players, 9th at the Masters. So the 2 tournaments that I'm focusing on when looking at this one, top 10s in both of them. It's more similar to the Masters, I'd say, than the Players, definitely, because it's a very well kept up with course that will use and abuse you if you get off in the rough, but has wide fairways and is a long par 72 on bent grass greens. That's all the things they have in common, along with the super strong field. So Adam Scott always does well at the Masters, finished 9th, and pretty much always does well at the Players too, finished 6th, and he pretty much always does well here, and I expect another top 10 finish out of him at a pretty low ownership clip too, compared to what we're used to seeing him at. So I like using Scott, and I think I like everyone in this range, really, and they're going to be so affordable. But you should probably say someone that you don't like, and I guess that guy for me would be Brooks Koepka at 9,700. Overpriced, only played here once back in 2015, finished 52nd. Not that incredible. He's in better form than he was to start the season. Finished 2nd at Texas, 16th at the Players, but and 11th at the Masters. I mean, I guess he probably does make for a good play. It's just that all of these guys are screaming good play to me, but you can only play so many of them. And I don't know, I'm just not really feeling Koepka compared to a lot of the other guys here. Could come back to bite me, and you can feel free to use Koepka all you want. Just I'm not really feeling him. I like the guys more expensive and less expensive than him a lot more, and you got to kind of make some choices around here. So not using him much. Matt Kuchar is a very interesting case. His course history here is like super elite, like crazy elite. Like he's an instant lock in cash, although he's already an instant lock in cash pretty much no matter where he plays. But the dude has 4 top 12 finishes in his last 6 tournaments. And at this course, he has 5 top 10s in his last 7 starts. Has made every cut, finishing pretty much top 15 every time he plays. It's ridiculous, his course history here. So, it's filthy. He's going to be super popular. It's hard to even tell you to get off of him because he's Kuchar. He's pretty much cash money every week. 9,400 is a bit pricey for him, and 9,500 on FanDuel as well, but given the circumstances, he's a great play. The only reason you wouldn't play him, honestly, is to get off of his high ownership. So, if you fade him and fade Rahm, then you're probably in a good spot for tournaments, but playing him with Rahm is a pretty solid way to start your lineup as well. Like, you can't do much better than that, given the players available. So feel free to make your own choice there. Patrick Reed has good course history here, has good recent form as well. 3 straight top 22 finishes after that streak of miscuts. He could make for a really sneaky play. I don't know if he's quite under the radar. I bet he's actually going to get touted a little. But the odds makers aren't really liking it. 40-1, that might just be a decent bet right there. But I don't know. I don't do sports betting, but that would be where I'd lay my money at this week. Patrick Reed, you know he can win, and he's definitely playing like he wants to win sometime soon because he's always up there on the leaderboard. He goes in, he goes out. He's kind of really up and down. Good for fantasy scoring purposes. Onto a very awkward play in 8,900, which is a pretty low price for him. We have Ricky Fowler, who is also 9,300 on FanDuel. A bit of a better price there. He's going to be insanely popular. He hasn't missed a cut all season. He leads the PGA Tour in adjusted stroke average. Statistically, off the charts in pretty much everything. He makes for the picture-perfect play here. He just has really garbage course history. Not total garbage. He finished second his first time here in 2010, but the last 3 years he's missed the cut. And outside of his second-place finish, he really doesn't have any finishes there to be desired since then. Odds-wise, he sticks out incredibly. He's 28-1. Reed is more expensive than him at 40-1. Kuchar and Koepka are above 30-1. So the pricing it's our first big head scratcher on the slate. You can play him, you can fade him, up to you. I try not to really tell you who to play, just try to tell you the situations of these guys. So do what you want with Fowler. I'm probably going to get off of him, but I don't know. It's up to you. Jason Duffner just burned everyone last week, and he could be a solid play at 8,700. Still expensive. I don't see why he'd be popular with Fowler right there. Just makes for a solid pivot. He's made his last 3 cuts here. He's generally a pretty safe option. I like him a lot for FanDuel at 8,200 too. The dude makes a lot of cuts, despite the fact that he just missed the cut. On the number, by the way. On the number. So, like Duffner, he's sneaky. Up next at 8,600, William McGirt, the defending champion at Memorial. Out of nowhere winner last year. Instantly you can tell that he's like the FanDuel play at 6,900. Very mispriced there. They obviously don't take tournament history into account, as where you can tell with Ricky Fowler's price and McGirt's price here that they obviously have taken course history into account quite a bit this week. And at 79-1, at 8,600, just $300 cheaper than 28 to 1 Ricky Fowler. You can see that DraftKings doesn't really respect the odds books quite as much as other sites like Fantasy Draft do. Fantasy Draft pretty much goes exclusively off of the odds. DraftKings has their own system going on, obviously weighting course history a lot. So McGirt, just too expensive for me. Play him on FanDuel. Emiliano Grillo is in a very nice spot at 8,500. He's never that highly owned. I don't think he's missed a cut all season, at least since the swing season. Putting some good finishes together. 11th at the Players, 11th here last year. He can make for a really fine play. Ollie Schneider-Jans dropping down to 8,300 is, I guess you just play him on FanDuel at 7,200 because that's a very expensive price for him. He's been doing well. I get that. Just he's still a bit of an unproven commodity. He's never played here before. I do like his approach game, but that's actually been fading off the last few weeks. Yeah, he's actually under average now, and that's with an extremely solid sample size of 12 tournaments this season. So Schneider-Jans might be someone to head the other way on as far as the stats go, because he's really doing nothing off of the tee, and that approach game that was carrying him, that's quickly fading. Finishing off the $8,000 range is Brian Harman at 8,200 and Bud Cauley at 8,000. We only have 4 guys in the $8,000 to $8,500 range this week. So this is kind of I think these guys will be a little bit over-owned just due to the salary scarcity, if that makes any sense. So it might make a lot of sense to skip over Schneider-Jans and Harman and Cauley just due to that. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are going to skip these guys just in general because they're going to want to they're really just going to want to punt to play Dustin Johnson and Rahm, and I can't really blame them for that. So not sure how this will work out, but I know that Bud Cauley at 8,000 will be popular. Both of these guys are great FanDuel plays. Harman at 7,000, but especially Bud Cauley at 7,100. Cauley's 3 of 3 in cuts made here, and he's 3 of 4 in top 10s made in his last 4 tournaments played. So expect him to be the hot commodity in this range. I like Tony Finau better, but he'll also be popular. At 7,900, 11th and 8th at this tournament in 2 events. Pretty damn good finishes recently, although he missed the cut at the Players, which is super forgivable. He's the same price as Webb Simpson, who topped 5 last week, and maybe with him putting a few very strong finishes together recently, and also finishing 11th last year, he might steal a bit of ownership off of Finau, and it really depends on which route you want to go. Finau being a pure bomber, one of the longest drivers on tour, actually very expensive FanDuel price at 8,600 compared to Webb Simpson's 7,500. May answer the question for you there, but Finau being the bomber, more GPP type player, with Simpson being your ball striking type, although he has more missed cuts on his resume, and he tends to miss cuts out of nowhere, so it actually probably hold them both to tournament play. But they're still very strong options, just given their odds and given their course history and recent form, and them both kind of being in the same range as a certain guy that will be super popular, and well, I'll just let you know who that is. That is Patrick Cantlay at 7,800. More importantly, $6,600 on FanDuel. That's a free spot, ladies and gentlemen. He is 5 of 5 in cuts made on the season. If you don't know the story behind him, he was a highly touted player a few years ago. I think back in like 2013 or so. Ended up with some debilitating injuries that took him out of play for a couple of years. He's back on tour, and he's instantly making a difference. Finished 3rd at the RBC Heritage, and last time we saw him finish 22nd at the Players. Adjusted stroke average, like 2nd best in the entire field, 3rd best, but kind of a small sample size to go off of. And statistically, the dude's like perfect. Like a long driver with slightly better than average driving accuracy. The approach game is a bit to be desired, but a very solid putter, and the dude hits lots of birdies. The problem I have with him this week is that he's just so hyped. He's going to be over-owned. I'm just going to stick to playing him on FanDuel, where he's basically a free space, and just fade him completely on DraftKings. That's going to be my hedge, just 100% on one site, 0% on the other. Kevin Chappell, who's coming off of a win in Texas, and the 7th place finish at the Masters. He's only 6,900 on FanDuel, too. A very, very good play there. 7,800 on DraftKings. Just one of those guys that FanDuel refused to ever price decently, like Perez. Or, I guess Hadwin for a while, or most notably, Russell Henley. Just super underpriced every week there. Pretty reasonably priced on DraftKings for this field, but still just a bit underpriced. He'll be a little popular. I would just not play him in cash, although he looks like a cash play. The long term, he's never been a cash play. He'll miss cuts out of nowhere and finish like dead last, but he'll also put up like a good amount of top 10 finishes, so a very strong GPP play. Again, I'd just rather play him on FanDuel where he's super cheap. Scott Piercy has been terrible for so long. 7,800 as well, same price as Chappell and Cantlay. Just another pivot off here, but he's looked really good in the last 2 weeks with 2 top 20 finishes. 7th at the Dean and DeLuca last week. Was on top of the leaderboard until like Sunday when he started to fall off because he can't putt for shit. His approach game is very solid. He's been leading fields at approach over the last few weeks. Like, his approach game is just on point. I'll probably just dabble with him on FanDuel, like a bunch of the guys in this range. He's 6,700, just a little bit more expensive than Cantlay. And I'll take some chances on DraftKings. I just need to see a little bit more from him, but this might be a good spot to at least take some of him, just because long term he's played really well at strong field events and not so well at scrub tournaments. I know the last couple of times we saw him out at these strong field events, the Players, the Masters, he missed the cut, but he's just always worth a little bit of exposure in super strong fields, because up until recently he was always money at like majors and stuff like that. So like him, going down into this range, I mean, this range right here is where it starts to get ridiculous. Phil Mickelson at 7,700. The dude's 11 for 11 in cuts made this year, and he's only 7,700. $9,200 on FanDuel. That's reasonable, but just way too cheap on DraftKings. Play Phil Mickelson. I know he loves to get into trouble, and that could really mess him up here. But he's made pretty much every cut here. He knows the course very well. Just finished 20th last year. You know he's a hardcore scrambler. You know he's going to show up at strong fields and be a contender. And most importantly, especially on the weekend slate, if he comes into the weekend slate like T50 or something, play the crap out of Phil Mickelson. He birdies so much, just always bleeds it back with bogey after double bogey, but he'll put up like a par round with 7 birdies, 5 bogeys, and a double bogey. That's just how Phil does. So I like him for that, especially like him on weekend. Tommy Fleetwood is interesting from the Euro Tour. I know he hasn't done much overseas yet, but I just know from his game that approach and greens and regulation, that's where he makes his money. I think that could help a lot here. And last guy from the $7,700 range, before I start bouncing down the field here a little bit, Kevin Streelman. I guess I only care about him because he's 5,600 on FanDuel. He's one of those really, really nice sneaky plays. 8th last year and 18th in 2015. And last week we saw him finish 18th at the Dean and DeLuca. Good green and regulation kind of ball striking guy. Very good strokes gained approach stats this year. That's something I like about him. It seems like all the Kevins are good at that for whatever reason. But nonetheless, Kevin Streelman, just a really nice FanDuel play. Not so much on DraftKings. This is where it starts to get crazy on DraftKings at $7,600. You have Kevin Kisner, Justin Thomas, and Adam Hadwin. Like, they have to be messing with people at this point. They're like, you know what? We always underprice certain guys at these super strong fields. Why not just make them all the same price just to mess with them? So they put last week's winner, Kisner, who finished 8th here in 2015, and leads the entire field in par 4 scoring. Par 4 scoring overall. Overall par 4 scoring, he leads the field in. He's top 3 in par 4 scoring, 450 to 500 yards, which is what we're kind of paying a lot of attention to here. And just tee to green, he's magnificent. The best in the field at green and regulation percentage, one of the best in the field at driving accuracy, and isn't totally short off the tee either. Like, he sets up for this course just perfectly. Putting amazing and everything. Coming off of a win, I know certain people don't like to play guys coming off of wins, but I will. I will absolutely play him coming off of a win. 7,600, that's just a crazy town price. The only reason I wouldn't play Kisner is to play one of these other two guys, because Justin Thomas, this is the first time we've seen him all season, not at like $9,000 or $10,000. So this is kind of a shocker here. It's not like he's been missing cuts. He MDF'd at the Players, and the Players kind of anything goes. So I don't really care about that. Did well at the Masters. The best in the field at birdie or better percentage. What's not to love about him? Adam Hadwin. He hasn't missed a cut all year. He's 11 for 11, just like Phil. And he finished 11th here last year. 2 for 2 in cuts made. The dude's a beast. Play the crap out of all of these guys. Just mix and match. Just take your favorites. And if the $7,600 range was like their studs at a discount range, the $7,500 range would be like, hey, these guys have been crap, but they've been good recently range, because they have Danny Lee, who finished 6th last week at the Dean DeLuca, and 5th at the Byron Nelson 2 weeks ago, who had been playing pretty badly before then, and Morgan Hoffman, who's put up a 12th, a T27, and a T12 in his last 3 events after just being a miscut machine before then. The only thing I really care about here would be Morgan Hoffman on FanDuel. He's only 6,100. That's pretty good. And then at the same price, Jim Furyk at 7,500. Awesome course history here. It's just he's missed like 5 cuts in a row at this point, and I don't know if I can play him. The dude's just old. On to the low $7,000 range. A few great plays kind of pop up. Kyle Stanley is going to be popular. He's finished 3rd here in 2013. But he was really good back in like 2012, 2013, around then. That's when he was really making strides on tour. But he just came off the miscut last week, so that'll keep his ownership in check. But before then, he was balling out. A few top 10s, 4th at the Players. I like Stanley. There's a lot to like there. And maybe people will be more attracted to David Lingmerth, oddly enough, at this same price. I've heard him talked up quite a bit so far. He won, beating Justin Rose in a playoff here in 2015. Probably should have made the announcement that Rose is withdrawn this week, but you'll figure it out. Giant O next to his name and all that. I haven't talked about him. But anyway, David Lingmerth has never missed the cut here. 27th here last year, and obviously won in 2015. Pretty decent form. Didn't MDF at the Players, but 12th last week, 18th at the Wells Fargo. Before then, he was just crap. Miscut. Just really bad. But just like Hoffman, just like Danny Lee, just gotten into form recently, mixed with good course history. Who knows what to make of it? I'm not that interested personally. Skipping on down, there are a few interesting plays. At 5,200 on FanDuel, Camilo Villegas has not missed the cut here in like 8 years in a row. He's played every single year, and he's never missed the cut. But he's also never finished better than 28th. So, be that as it may, at least he's safe to make the cut at 5,200. That's something. More interested in Gary Woodland, 7,200 on DraftKings. That's really nice. He hasn't really been bad at all this season. Obviously, he's better early on in the season, but we haven't really seen him too much recently. Fourth here last year, and a pretty good course history outside of that. Like Woodland a lot. Ross Fisher is back to tempt us again at 6,100, 6,200 on FanDuel. Missed the cut last time out at the Players, which, again, is forgivable. He barely missed the cut. It's just like, I haven't seen him do anything overseas outside of doing very well at the WGC event, but that wasn't exactly in America. That was in Mexico. But still, he's been a PGA Tour player before, since going to Euro full-time. The odds still like him quite a bit, but I am using British books, so it might overvalue Fisher a little bit. I just find their odds are, in general, a little better than the American books that are like juiced to hell. But he just kind of pops on the sheet because he only has one event recorded, and I do believe that is it couldn't be the Masters. They don't record stats. I think it was the WGC Mexico event, so his stats look really great because he finished like second there, which is also a strong field and all that, but I don't know. He did make the cut at the Masters, so interesting play. I don't know if anyone will bite on that, but I'll take a shot at it. And now we get into the good part, the $6,000 range, where this is just silly. I'm going to just name some names, and I don't even have to do much analysis here because it's just ridiculous. At 6,900, you have Byung-Hun An, Mark Leishman, with crazy good course history, Mark Leishman. Steve Stricker, with arguably the best course history outside of Kuchar here, winning in 2011. At 6,900, Steve Stricker, in great form. I love Steve Stricker a lot this week. Moving along, Bill Haas, 12th last week after that miscut streak, and a great course history here outside of a miscut last year, so kind of interesting, but still, Bill Haas, Zach Johnson, Luke Donald. Luke Donald also having really nice course history. Man, that really makes for that really just paints a picture of who does well here. When you've got great course history from Stricker, Furyk, Kuchar, and Donald. That's like the quadfecta of plunkers on tour. Like, they all have the same play style, so just pick guys like that. Shit. Pick your maybe this will be the time CT Pan breaks out, 'cause that's how I've described his game before. Maybe this is finally the week. Probably not, but maybe. But yeah, this whole $6,900 range, you can't go wrong with any of them. Like, Byung-Hun An is playing ridiculous. 3 straight top 10 finishes. Hasn't missed a cut all year. Just nasty. He's going to be super popular. Mark Leishman, good course history, good form, long, short, medium, whatever form, he's got it. Can't really go wrong there. And I just personally love Steve Stricker. He's so good at Midwest courses, like in Iowa at the John Deere Classic. He has one of the best course histories in all of Tour. Like, he won there like 3 years in a row or some crazy shit like that. So, like Steve Stricker a lot. And Zach Johnson, Luke Donald, both these guys just fit the mold of what works here. Even Bill Haas. So this whole range is just amazing. I don't know if anyone will use Pat Perez after he completely screwed everyone last week, but it did end up just barely missing the cut in a crazy wind-filled tournament. Like, I guess I can forgive that. And looking outside of that, he's been awesome this year. So maybe Fat Pat will get a little love from me. I don't know. He's not that fat. I take that back. I take that back. I'm sorry. I take that back. You're not fat. You're lovable. Charles Schwartzel has 3 top 11 finishes here in the last 4 years, and how will I word this stat? Okay, 6 top 27 finishes in the last 7 events played. How's that for some number juxtaposition? But anyway, he withdrew from the Byron Nelson, which was crappy. that burned me a lot, and missed the cut at the Players, which also burned me a lot. So questionable form, like big question, but finished 3rd at the Masters. I like that. So I don't know what's going on there. I probably should look into this a little more, honestly. But Schwartzel, if all systems are go, I just want to unleash the Schwartzel, because no one believes in the power of the Schwartz, but I might. It's just I kind of also believe in a few other people in this price range, Pat Perez and my BAE, my Bay from Euro Tour, Peter Uihlein, who never finishes outside of the top 30. Granted, that is the Euro Tour. It's a lot easier than the PGA Tour, but we saw him here in Houston. Finished T23, and the dude's American. He's doing the Koepka thing. He's playing overseas. Eventually, hopefully wanting to come back over here. Maybe he just likes to find Swedish bitches. I don't know, but nonetheless, Peter Uihlein, play the fuck out of him. People that play PGA week to week won't really know who he is. Granted, they will probably click on his name and see his awesome Euro game log, but he's still not a known commodity like a Charles Schwartzel who won the Masters and Pat Perez. So I like him a lot. I just like the dude. He's so cash money, and the fact that we've seen him perform in America, which is something the European guys don't usually do, and him being American, I can feel that play a lot. Billy Horschel, good course history here, won at the Byron Nelson and followed that up with a not miscut at the Dean DeLuca, so that means he's all right. Anyway, his statistical game fits the course here a lot. He's a great ball striker, always has been. He's always owned the stat, greens and regulation. Every year you see him on the top like 20. Every year, going back the last like 5 years. So I like him. Brandon Steele, haven't seen too much of him recently, but he's been just solid. Even though his prices dropped over the last few tournaments for whatever reason, he hasn't messed up at all so far this year. Coming off the 6th at the Players. Give me some Brendan Steele, 20th year last year. And Keegan Bradley at 6,700 as well. 8th place in this tournament 2 years in a row. I just don't know if I can trust Keegan Bradley. I'm pretty sure that's everyone's opinion of him at this point. And I'm really mad that Sergio's not playing this week, because you could do the Spanish trifecta of Rom, Sergio, and Rafael Cabrera Bello. But you can use Cabrera Bello as your replacement Sergio, because I think he's safe. He had those 3 miscuts in a row, which got me off of him. But follow that up with the 24th at the Wells Fargo, 4th at the Players. I'm going to forgive him for that little streak. Let's just call it a little bad streak, because long term, the dude's usually solid. Like last year, he didn't miss a cut, like ever. Dude was solid, whether it was Euro, America, he didn't care. He was coming like top 20 all the time. He showed a few top 20s in a row. I'm going to ride that a little bit until it inevitably crashes and burns me. But I'm way back in on Rafael Cabrera Bello this week, and I think he's going to get swept under the rug of the Steeles and Billy Horschels in this range, and especially the guys in the $6,900 range and around there, where it's crazy. And the guys in this range I'm about to talk about, 6,500, a few other laughable plays. And let's just get it started with probably the highest upside $6,500 play I've ever seen. Kevin Chway, who's coming off of 5 top 20 finishes in a row. Like, that is nasty. The dude bombs it almost as long as DJ. Like, he can kill it off the tee. And ball striking, he's not even bad, just like slightly above average, and has been putting it well. The dude's just a beast. He hits a ton of birdies. Yeah, a few eagles too. Like, he's going to destroy these par 5s. Just love Kevin Tway a lot this week. He ranks in the top 20 in the efficiency scoring projections. And a lot of that is just his awesome par 5 scoring, decent marks in the long par 4 scoring. Just everything about Kevin Tway outside of his inexperience here just screams, play me. Like, anyone that looks at game logs would be like, instant play, no matter what, if they find him down there. Like, if they just sort by average DraftKings points per tournament, he's going to, like, jump to the top. So, he's going to be super popular. I don't know how you can get off of him outside of just not selecting him to be in your roster. For whatever reason that may be. Maybe it's because we're out of Texas. I mean, that might be a hot reason to do it. Look where he's done well. All the Texas tracks. So, that might be a nice little take. I like him at 6,800 on FanDuel as well. But, man, 6,500 on DraftKings, that's just crazy. That's crazy town. Like, you see how you can afford Dustin Johnson and Rahm so easily. Guys like Tway at 6,500. Guys like Hoffman and Kang at 6,500. The good Hoffman, Charlie Hoffman, considerably cheaper than Morgan Hoffman. That is a crime. The dude hasn't done anything to why is DraftKings screwing with Hoffman's price so much? He's getting cheaper every single week. Granted, this is a strong tournament, but like, he finished 24th last week. He's made 5 cuts in a row, or 4 cuts in a row. He made like 9 of 8 cuts, and he hasn't put up like top 20 finishes really, but still, dude's just making cuts. He's a way better golfer than a lot of the other guys in this range. I don't know why Hunter Mahan is more expensive than Charlie Hoffman. That makes no sense. But he actually led the field in strokes gained approach last week, and greens and regulation as well. So that's very interesting. I don't like his scrambling stats. That's something that kind of worries me here, and is really bad putting. But man, he was awesome last weekend. Like, he barely made the cut and then just charged up on Saturday. Pretty encouraging to see. And last time he was here, back in 2014, he finished 19th. So I love Hoffman. I love him as a pivot directly off of Tway, who's going to be like super popular. He's pretty much the same play as he was last week. Also, he's going to be a pivot off of Kang, because people looking at the game logs also be like, damn, Kang has made a lot of top 30 finishes in a row. Outside of last week, where he finished 57th, but still made the cut. Just didn't look his usual self. Like, if you play him in the weekend slate, which I always do, you had a rough time. Nonetheless, him at 6,500, that's just kind of a crazy price. Cameron Smith just won at the Zurich Classic with Jonas Blixt, and was looking good, like 6th in Texas. Just 2 missed cuts in a row at the Players and the Dean DeLuca. And those might be the most excusable miscuts on the season. I mean, the Players, Sawgrass is Water City. It's one of the most forgivable miscuts that you have. Probably the most forgivable miscut outside of like the U.S. Open every year. And then last week at the Dean DeLuca, it was like Wind City. Like, the PM tee times got rocked. So you can get a very, very low-owned Cameron Smith this week, and I like that a lot, just considering where he missed the cut at. So that could be an interesting play right there, especially with all the other plays in this range. And after this range, $6,500, the talent level truly does drop off quite a bit. There are just a couple of guys that you got to talk about. Soren Kjeldsen at 6,400 does well in strong fields. 20th here last year, and looks to be a solid play as usual. In European Tour events, he's always overpriced, but here on tour, on the PGA Tour, he's always underpriced. So I like him a lot. Siwoo Kim I don't like. He missed the cut last week after winning the Players. So I'm sure that was just a fluky-ish week, as that's like the flukiest course on tour. So at 6,400, while that's cheap, and while I'll probably take like one shot in a GPP of the lowest stakes, Can't do much outside of that when there's Keldson right there and the plethora of $6,500 plays. And then the last play I'll really talk about, because it's quite an awesome play. It's going to be a very popular play. $6,300, Nick Taylor. $5,500 on FanDuel. That's pretty much a lock on FanDuel, I'd say. $5,500 for a guy that's made like 7 cuts in a row. Couple of top 10s until his 61st place finish last week, which was not the greatest, but kind of a fluky week, I guess. Those top 10s, those top 20s, just the dude's been playing really well, and there's no one part of his game that even explains it. He's just been slightly above average in every statistical category outside of putting. He's a bad putter, but the dude can drive. The dude is a pretty reasonable ball striker, good scrambler. I like him just because he's been on that roll of form, and he doesn't have much of a course history here. But it's really just that price, $6,300. Like, you're gonna wanna, if you're gonna wanna go Rom and DJ, you gotta lock in Nick Taylor, and I think that'll make for a lot of ties, because I think a lot of people are gonna start their lineup exactly like this: DJ, Rom, Taylor, and Tway, and then whichever 2 guys fit best in there, like maybe fit in like a Kisner or a Justin Thomas or something. That's going to be a very, very repeated lineup, I'm sure, if you do that. Excuse me. And a few other just interesting plays, like FanDuel. 4,900, Ryan Ruffles. Someone we haven't seen in quite a bit, but finished 38th here last year. We know he's a super long bomber, like DJ long. And he was all right last year. I mean, he would miss some cuts, but he made a lot of cuts and had some pretty decent finishes. So just kind of an unknown name. They'll be super low owned. They could be sneaky. The only guy in the $6,200 range, which is the cheapest this week for some reason. Like, they always just pick a random price to be the lowest every week, and it changes every week. But $6,200, the lowest that we have for this tournament. And in this range, the pick would obviously be Vaughn Taylor. I know Vijay Singh has good course history here, but he's a little old. And Hearn, also good course history here, just really, really, really bad form. Vaughn Taylor, while he missed the cut here last year, he has 2 top 20s in his last 3 events played. 18th last week at the Dean DeLuca. Just a great ball striker, always has been, and good scrambler. That's really it. I'd try to avoid this range, honestly. Like, you can bottom out at 6,500 and do great. I kind of glazed over. Someone wanted to come back and touch on real fast. Bubba Watson is only 6,600. Definitely the cheapest we've ever seen Bubba. I like him a lot. His course history here is very solid. 3rd in 2014. Has made 7 of 8 cuts in a row. 6,700 on FanDuel. That's not bad either. I like him in tournaments, but obviously you can't trust him in cash. Okay, so that will wrap up the podcast for me. I've gone through the whole field and all that, and my voice is starting to get really rasped as I've had to do this early in the morning. Had a rough weekend. Had to bury my cousin on Memorial Day, and he was in the service, so kind of a draining weekend for me. I've had to spend a lot of the time with the family and all that, so getting this out a little bit later than usual, but always good to have a nice golf tournament to look to. And they're headed to my my neck of the woods. I was actually going to go to this tournament here, but end up not working out with the work schedule, but it's all good. I might head on down there Saturday if I can find like a scalp ticket or something, or maybe Sunday. I don't know, maybe. I'll let you guys know what happens there. But thanks for listening. And remember that if you want to check out the spreadsheet that's got not only course history, recent forms, and fantasy projections and aggregated odds, but also the stat cruncher, which I've been adding recently since we've got a good chunk of data to go off of for each player. That's pretty awesome. You can just save the spreadsheet to your drive, your Google Drive, or download it in Excel. You can change all the weights on there as you want. It's just a simple model. It takes like odds and forms, course history, all the stats, and weights them based on their standard deviations, that they are better or worse than the field in those different categories. Weights them all differently, so you can pump out not only a projection, but just sort of a score it gives each golfer. And like right now, if you look at the preliminary numbers, which I strongly suggest you go in there and change to your liking, just some numbers I put up on there just based on how I was feeling about the course. You've got Dustin Johnson, Rahm, Spieth, Matsuyama, and then Fowler. They come as the top 5. So it's pretty solid. Really gives you a nice idea of how everyone looks all together. Definitely something I encourage you guys to check out and mess with for yourself. And of course, we've got the projections up on the domination station, so you can optimize lineups that way. And yep, that'll do it. So check us out at dfsarmy.com, promo code TACO, and I will see you guys next week. Hope you guys win lots of money. Later.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA. Weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.